Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where it's time to get started on the next phase of Thunder Mesa Reimagined. And to that end, I'm going to be building some box girder benchwork for a whole new large section of layout that's going to be back here in the corner. And this is the area I'm talking about. I need to fill this with about a 4 by 7 foot section of benchwork, because that's where the second half of the main loop of the Thunder Mesa main line is going to be located. Looking at the layout plan, this is the section I'm talking about. I call it the canyon section because it houses the second and larger half of Coyote Canyon. Eventually, it'll also be home to the Mexican village of Zocalo Plaza and spooky Ravenswood Manor up on the hilltop. So at this point, the disassembly, the demo of the original Thunder Mesa layout is completely finished, and I'm happy to have all that behind me. And I've already started in building some new sections of benchwork and some new scenery for the layout. This is all on the end of the Big Thunder section here. This is part of Coyote Canyon, and the rest of it, as I mentioned, is going to be in the new section. Really excited to get started on this new section of layout. It's like a completely blank canvas, starting from scratch, and I get to see if I can make it, turn out and look the way I imagine it to look. Unfortunately, I have a little bit of a head start because I already have this section of stand here. This is the stand that was under this section of the layout before, so I thought it'd be a good idea to reuse it over here again. Unfortunately, it's not quite big enough for the entire new canyon section that's going to be over here, so I need to build a secondary stand to go right about here. Now this existing stand is about 44 inches tall, which is the same height as the stand underneath the Big Thunder section. The new stand I want to build over here is going to be about 30 inches tall, and that's to allow for the depth of the canyon over on this side, which I want to have aligned visually with what I've already established right here. So that means my box girder frame is going to have to be sort of a split level deal, higher on one side and lower on the other. That's a little bit more complicated than just a basic, tabletop. So before I start cutting up lumber, I should probably draw a plan. I've got some blue line grid paper here with 1/8 inch squares, so I'm going to draw my plan at 1/8 of an inch equals 1 inch. And to further complicate things here, this box girder frame is 3 feet wide on one side and 4 feet wide on the other side, and 7 foot long overall, with a little indent here in the middle where the aisle comes in. So here's what I came up with. Got a box girder frame. It's made from 1x4s, and the shaded pieces represent the lower level. So that's going to be, all of this will be about 13 inches lower than this. And that way, once the risers are in and the plywood sub-road bed, everything should match up perfectly with the existing layout, as long as my math is correct. This also gives me a good approximate idea of how much 1x4 lumber I'm going to need to buy. And that's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 8-foot lengths, just to be on the safe side. I decided to build the stand first, cutting the 2x2 legs to the proper length so that the entire thing would stand 31 inches tall when fully assembled, with casters on the bottom. Then I cut the 4 1x2 cross pieces that would tie the legs together, again taking careful measurements so that the stand would be the required 24 inches wide when fully assembled. To assemble the stand, I used 1¼ inch interior wood screws and yellow carpenter's glue at the joints. Making sure that everything was square, I began by attaching the 1x2 cross pieces to the 2x2 legs. To prevent splitting, all of the holes were pre-drilled before driving in the wood screws. Then I added some 1x2 sway braces on each side of the leg assembly to keep everything strong and square. A 1x3 foot piece was added to the bottom of each leg assembly to have a place for the swiveling casters to be mounted. I built two identical leg assemblies this way, but I'm only showing one here for clarity. Then it was time to build the 36-inch long L girders. I made two of these, and they will form the shelf that the layout box frame rests on. I used 1x3s, securely gluing and screwing one on top of the other. I also countersunk the screws so that the box frame won't get hung up on them. Working on one side at a time, I assembled the stand. First, attaching an L girder to the top, and then a 1x3 brace to the bottom. A 1x2 diagonal sway brace was also added. Turning the whole thing over, the entire process was repeated on the other side. Then it was time to add the 2-inch swiveling casters. Note that 2-inch casters actually measure 2.5 inches tall. The stand was turned upside down and one set was securely screwed at each of the 4 corners. Success! Now we have a stand for the canyon section that measures 36 inches long, 24 inches wide, and 31 inches tall. I took a good look at my drawing again to see if there were any changes I wanted to make. There weren't many. Then I began cutting the 1x4 framing to length. In my experience, a lot of model railroad benchwork is a little overbuilt. And I know that an open box grid made from 1x4s will be plenty strong enough to hold the roadbed, track, scenery, and everything else that will come after, so long as that framing is as straight and square as I can make it. Once again, I used wood glue and screws to secure all of the joints, laying everything out on a level surface and using a framing square to line up the corners. Since this box frame is really in 2 parts, an upper and a lower deck, I started with the upper assembly first. I pre-drilled pilot holes and secured each joint with 2 wood screws. Lumber for the lower frame deck was placed into position with the completed upper frame, but not attached. This made it easier to align both frames properly during construction. Following my drawing, a notch was cut into the front brace of the lower section to match up with the river level from the previously built Coyote Canyon section. Interior cross braces were added to the box frame as needed to improve strength and stability. Finally, some 16.5-inch long 2x2 risers were added at important joints to join the lower and upper deck together when they're installed at the studio. I used a square to make sure the risers were attached at a 90-degree angle. Then it was time to load all the pieces into the van and drive them up the hill to Jerome. Well, I got everything up here safe and sound, and the first thing I need to do to get it installed is going to be to move the big Thunder section out a little bit to give myself a little bit of room to maneuver back here. That's probably good enough. And that, my friends, is why everything in here is on wheels. Now the new stand needs to go right about here. And then I can set the lower deck of the canyon section on top of that. Then the upper deck section should fit right here. Awesome. That's about perfect. Now I'll attach the upper deck to the tall frame with a couple of wood screws. Now I just need to get these uprights clamped in the proper position, and we can get everything put together. I've given myself some little pencil marks up here on top of the box frame to help me out. I've rolled the big Thunder section back over here, and I'm clamping these two together temporarily because these need to line up right here. And I want to do this before I attach the stand. And this is all for the same reason that I didn't put the whole thing together back in my garage. I waited till I got up here. And the reason is, this is a 100-year-old building, and the floor is not level. In fact, nothing in this building is plumb or level. So you always have to deal with that. You always have to make adjustments, lots of shimming and things like that to get things to sit, you know, properly, no matter how carefully you measure. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. You can see this gap back here between the stand and the box frame, and it gets larger towards the back. The thing is, the box frame is actually sitting fairly level. So what that tells me is there's a dip in the floor back there. So I'm going to need to put some sort of shim or something underneath those rear wheels for this to sit properly. Just part of the fun of being in Jerome in a 100-year-old building. Well, I had to use some pretty good sized shims down there to compensate for the floor, but we got it done. Let me show you something else that's weird. You can see this little gap right here. I'd forgotten about this. I discovered this when I first installed the layout here at the studio. This back wall doesn't come out at a 90-degree angle from the side wall. It actually kind of slowly creeps to the north. So I have to compensate for that as well. Well, it's great to see things starting to take shape. So this will be the larger part of Coyote Canyon. And if you look at the plan, it actually goes straight back into the backdrop here, but I changed my mind about that. I'm going to have it come and kind of circle around and make a left turn into the next section of layout down that way. So we'll get a longer, more dramatic canyon than if it just kind of went back and disappeared into the backdrop. Then up here, this is where Zoccola Plaza will be located, and there'll be a hill right up here where Ravenswood Manor is going to be installed. Can't wait to get to that build. Now coming off of right here, I'm going to have a 2-foot by 5-foot section of layout, and this is where the town of Thunder Mesa is going to be located, now across the aisle from the big Thunder section. I think it's going to look great over here. It's going to be much better access for me and much better visibility for people who come to visit the studio. I think I might do some changes to the backdrop back here though before I start building the town. And just like that, things are really starting to take shape here on Thunder Mesa Reimagined. In fact, I would love to be able to keep going, but unfortunately I am out of time for this week. So I hope you will tune in to the next episode when I'll be adding some plywood sub-road bed, some cork road bed, and maybe even laying some track over here on the new section. You know, if it's your first time here, I hope you will subscribe and hit that notification bell so YouTube will let you know when new videos are coming from Thunder Mesa Studio. You can also follow us over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and see what's happening on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. As always, a huge shout out and thank you to our Patreon members who help to make these videos possible. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Adios for now.